Okay, let's talk about the oughts that Brock brought up. Now, Brock has blocked me. Second time. This time he's made no excuse. The last time he claimed I slandered his wife, when in fact all I simply did was point out his hypocrisy and his plagiarism, and question if there was ever anything he ever said that was original. I would even question whether his work at a college-level communications course was ever original on its own merit. But I don't have his papers. I couldn't check them myself. But let's move on to his point. He claims that there's an oughtness to how we should behave. Actually, I would simply call that there's moral aspects to how we behave. He claims this oughtness is like a watch ought to be accurate as a timekeeper. Of course, the watch was repurposed materials. In other words, the metals, the leather strap or fabric strap, the crystal, etc., were materials that were repurposed by humans to perform a function. And the truth is, that watch does follow, I guess you could call, an ought. And that's the laws of nature. And since we can't make watches utterly perfect, because perfection is simply an abstract extrapolation of the idea of better, perfection doesn't exist, then that watch, being inaccurate to some extent, is following its oughtness, because it ought to follow the laws of nature. It ought to follow the rules that nature has, and it is. So it may not be following how we feel it should be. It's not following the oughtness we would impose on it, but it is following its own oughtness. Now, the concept of ought is I think is a kind of a foolish concept. Trying to designate something as it ought to be doesn't really, it's not something derived from what things are. It's derived from almost the old Platonic concepts of forms. Things should be this way because this is what the pure form is. Excuse me. Of course, in reality, nothing is ever like that. In reality, there is no perfect form. There is only the forms that we can actually observe in a demonstrable way. Perfection, the Platonic forms, the root of oughtness, doesn't exist. Morals aren't perfect, and morals aren't the same from person to person or culture to culture. You can't define an ought when it comes to morality in an objective fashion. You can always resort to an emotional plea, but then again, that's not an argument. So when it comes to your claims, Brock, about the oughtness somehow proving the existence of a God or supporting the Christian worldview, it doesn't, because you fail the main task, which would be to objectively demonstrate that oughtness actually exists as something that, like I said, is objective versus something that is subjective. We can give subjective oughtness to anything, but I'd like to see you demonstrate an objective oughtness. And I say good luck on that. Now, I want to move on to this next topic. You're talking about morality here, Brock. And you're talking about the countries. Where's the country going to go if it doesn't have a moral compass? Well, if we look at some countries, like, say, Norway or Sweden, where the majority of those countries are atheists, wow, those countries do quite well morally. They have low crime rates, they live well, there's low rates of aggressive behavior towards each other. Yet in the more religious countries, we see things like abortion doctor killings, people killing abortion doctors. We see beheadings. We see all sorts of atrocious things in the more religious countries where people choose to be religious. Now, in other countries where either anti-religion is enforced on them and it's not a choice, or religion is forced upon them and it's not a choice, then we again see pretty much violence. So I think the main theme there is you can't impose a view on a group of people without having resistance. So let's move back to you, Brock. You are a Class A hypocrite. You continue to plagiarize, Brock. Yes, you try to source your material, but you never state where your material is originally yours or where you're pretty damn near quoting verbatim it is from someone else, such as Zacharias. So, Brock, there's that. You claim a moral high ground, and then you continue to plagiarize. You attempt to censor people, such as myself, while claiming moral high ground. You are highly dishonest in regards to science, because you throw out these demonstrably false claims in regards to science, such as calling Ida a feline, and then trying to cover up your little mistake. Or bringing up those so-called frauds and hoaxes, which some of them were frauds, some of them were hoaxes, but again, it was science that corrected itself. So, Brock, you have no place to stand on any moral high ground. Indeed, you're more in the abyss of morality than most of the people I've seen here. You are just that one level above Venom Fang X, the original. The only thing you haven't done is defrauded a child's hospital. But you've lied, you've plagiarized, you've been dishonest about how you behave towards people, you've censored, you've done everything Venom Fang X has done and was, well, disliked for. Brock, you're a bad man. Now, that'll be it for today.
Remember a few months back, Ida, the fossil that was propped up with a lot more money than scientific fact? Well, turns out it's a little closer to Garfield than the evolutionists would care to admit. Turns out we were looking at a feline, some version of a Flintstone pussycat.